Greetings, nerds. This is Will Polk, producer of the Seed of Nerd podcast with our host, Sarah Beaumont. And tonight we are welcoming two special guests to the podcast. We have Christopher Ikpoh and Steffon Thomas from the Creative Extreme. Welcome, gentlemen, to the podcast.
Hello.
Thank you
for having us.
Appreciate it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and want to just give us, special thanks to your publicist Lillian for setting this up, and glad we were able to do that tonight. But yeah, so really wanted to just kick off our conversation here. I know we were talking in the pre-show. We definitely found that we had some common things as far as in our personal lives of interest, but really just want to have you share with our listeners and viewers here. Tell us about the Creative Extreme and how you both met and what the Creative Extreme is.
Well, the Creative Extreme is essentially it's an entertainment company. We focus on I was going to say big budget storytelling. But what I mean by that is we like sci-fi, we like fantasy. We started our company with a project that we called Project 365, where we created one comic book style character for every day of the year. We started that in 2016. And we basically wanted to kind of create an instant universe. We, at the time, Marvel was popping off big and DC was starting to come into the game. And of course, you had everything with all, Star Wars and the Star Trek movies. So all stuff that we really loved, along with, all the different all the different arenas of fantasy and sci-fi. And Chris and I have been, working on our own stories individually. And then we reconnected because we went to school together, played basketball together at Oberlin College, where Chris, of course, was the man. He was the star of the team. He took us to the promised land. Well, took us almost to the promised land. We did really well, and
No, Oberlin is
we rode his coattails to a lot of incredible wins, and and I backed them up. I was a third string point guard, so I was like, get in, when I can, play a little bit here and there, but
he came with game though. When he came with game. He came right.
So did y'all win like the Division III? Did y'all win like the Division III championships, or was that?
Nah. We didn't get into any championships, but we made
it to the tourney. Yeah, we made it to the tourney.
Yeah, we made it. Yeah, so yeah, we did okay here and there. And we had met there. And we that was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then maybe 12 years after that, after we both graduated, we reconnected. I mean, we had been in contact, but I didn't know that Chris was also writing. I went straight into the creative world and started working at American Greetings, which is a card company. I wrote cards for a few years, and I was doing freelance writing and freelance story editing. Chris hits me up and says, "Hey, I got a book. Would you like to edit my book?" I said, "Absolutely, I'll edit your book." He didn't send me a book. He sent me a saga, like a behemoth of a 500-page epic. And so started editing that. Then when I said, we started doing Project 365. I was like, man, you have a lot of characters. I have a lot of characters. Let's throw them together. Project 365 was born. And then from there, we started building new characters off of those characters.
Yeah, tell me a little bit more about Chris. Let me share your story. I know, just looking at some of the materials, Steffon, I know you mentioned. I was going to ask about your days as working at American Greetings. I probably read one of your greeting cards probably out there somewhere as far as the messages in there. But Chris, I think you have a background in the corporate world, and your nickname is the Artista. So.
Yeah, the artista. Steffon's the abbot. He's been my writing mentor as well as my brother and my partner in crime in this. So whenever I need wisdom, I put the water buckets on my shoulders and I walk the 10 miles up the stone steps to the top of the mountain, and I go to the abbot for all the wisdom I need. The artista was just something a moniker that I gave to myself when I started writing. I did a bunch of different kind of things: poetry, short stories, philosophical musings, all this kind of stuff. But I had it underneath the Christopher Isaac Society. And then that's kind of what birthed the novel. And then that took me over to Steph, and then, like Steph said, so on and so forth. But yeah, I graduated with a pre-law degree, and never went into that world because I was working as a paralegal and I was training a law school graduate who couldn't get a job as a lawyer because the market was so oversaturated with law school graduates and people who had passed the bar were trying to get a job. So I'm training her to be a paralegal. And long story short, she was just basically like, "It's not worth it, dog. Don't do it." And so I was like, well, damn. So then I shifted course, and then I got into sales. You can always get a job in sales, right? So I got a job in sales, started out boiler room stuff, making 100, 150 phone calls a day at a desk, just grinding it out. Over the years, worked my way up the ladder, switched companies here and there, moved into a manager position, moved into an assistant vice president position with a global finance firm, and now I'm with JP Morgan as a vice president. So that's my career, my day job. The passion, though, the love, right? What I feel my calling is, what God has placed on my soul, is creative extreme. And so, like Steph said, I sent him the book, we got connected, and we started doing it. And then, here we are. We've been rocking ever since.
Yeah, that was about, so if I recall, you guys, the creative history in the 365, was that around the 2011, 2015 time range?
Yeah, about 2015 is where we kind of started kind of conceptualizing it, and then we launched on January 1st, 2016.
So what are some of the characters in Project 365? I'm very curious as far as
man.
I know whenever I saw the materials, and it was just like a universe. It seems.
There's a lot going on. It's so hard. I guess, I mean, kind of, we can just kind of, quick overview of a few of the characters that just immediately pop into my head right now. It's like on any given day, a different character will pop into my head. But I mean, you start out with, actually, I'll go with the story that we're kind of working on right now, the Ghost Orphanage. So we have this story about these ancient spirits that were that been roaming the earth for thousands of years. And the reason they're roaming the earth is because when the people they were attached to got killed, they got killed by a special weapon that was made of demon's blood, right? So now when they got killed, their souls couldn't go to heaven, couldn't go to hell. They were placed in this purgatory on earth. And so they hide inside of human bodies. And the only people that can send them into the afterlife are these hunters who come from these 7 specialized bloodlines. So over these centuries, they've been hunting these hunters have been hunting down these ghost orphans because they have no home, right? So they've been hunting down these ghost orphans, and the main bloodline is the House of Philadelphia, and Peter Philadelphia is one of our main characters, a sick swordsman, slicing and dicing. And so it's a lot of so it's a story that definitely centers around some kind of epic kind of spiritual battles. It plays in that realm. It plays in the of course the supernatural realm, but it's also just high octane action, sword fights, kung fu, gun fu.
It's like if you take John Wick but with swords. And then you combine it with the supernatural lore of Constantine, right? Having to hunt down these spiritual entities and stuff. I mean, I love it. It's one of my favorite IPs that we have is Ghost Orphanage. But like Steph said, the breadth of what we have. I mean, you just look at Project 365 in January. So we got, the City Watch, we got the Iga clan, we got Musashi, we have the Sister Clique in February, we have Hosho and the Zibdian triplets in March. we have the Ghost Orphanage, we have the Sacred Asylum, we have the Captain Infinity Saga, we got the Alpha Initiative. I mean, there's so many groups, characters, spanning the whole year. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's so dope. I mean, one of the things you know, as when I was doing some prep for the show, and you know, notice the philosophy, and it's really coming out loud and clear here, is imagination without limitation for your company. So what created, what was the inspiration for that, as far as, you know, as far as the culture, you know, that you guys were trying to establish with the creative extreme, and you know, and looking at the materials, I mean, it's a very diverse range of characters. So can you share a little bit more about that? It seems that seems to be your core foundation for your company.
Yeah, for sure. Like, just the idea of trying to take every story to its kind of logical extreme, or sometimes illogical extreme, but trying to push, you know, trying to push the envelope everywhere we can, you know. So, and that doesn't always mean make it bigger. That doesn't always mean make it louder. Sometimes that means make it deeper, you know, make your characters' decisions a little bit more extreme. You know, we're very much about active characters, active protagonists. That is really at like the base of like our storytelling. So how do we have our characters push the story forward, you know? And so when it comes to that whole that whole idea of imagination, we're like, all right, like, you know, what can we build on? Because there's already so much great storytelling out there, right? Like, we definitely, you know, we're definitely trying to, like, we're the classic thing is like when your idols become your rivals, right? We love Marvel, we love DC, but we're trying to take over, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, but you know, I mean, that's the kind of ambition that we have. But you know, you look at some of the great stuff that's out there, and we're like, all right, how can we take this and push it forward? I really like one of the main things, and I kind of like Chris go with this a little bit, but one of the main things that kind of started where we went in our storytelling was when Chris was kind of looking at some Star Wars stuff. Love Star Wars, we love it. And he was like, yo, he was like sometimes when they depict Darth Vader, I don't think they show like how sick he can actually be. I think that they can make him even sicker if they push the envelope a little bit. And then I was like, well, what would you do? And he was like, well, I would do this, this, and this. And I was like, write it, man. Write that, you know. And it was just kind of like, you know, taking stuff and saying like, man, how can we push it in a different direction, you know? And that also comes with, like, you know, the diversity as well, which is another pillar of what we do. It's like, okay, a part of making things extreme, pushing a limit, pushing the imagination, is imagining things from a lot of different points of view, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different histories, a lot of different mythologies, a lot of different religions, a lot of different ethnicities, you know, like digging in, you know, kind of, you know, there's a whole argument about who is allowed to tell whose stories, right? It's like, well, if you're not this, can you tell that story? It's like, I mean, to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, like, we're not going to make every one of our stories about a Black guy. Like, we got to have other people. You know, we got to, but we also want to be respectful of that, right? We want to make sure that we're not being irresponsible. We're trying to, you know, represent like a diverse storytelling. So that's just kind of a little bit of kind of what we lean on when we think about that imagination without limitation. Chris, what did I miss?
No, man. I mean, that's spot on. Like Steph said, you know, we wanted to tell as many different types of stories as we could. One, for mass appeal, obviously, excuse me, but also because, you know, we have friends and family who are from all different backgrounds, all different, you know, cultures and groups and stuff. So we wanted everybody to be able to at least find a handful of characters or a few characters that they can really hold on to and say, this is me, or this is it for me right here, you know, because it's that feeling of empathy that really draws them in, and then brings them along the ride with us. And if just one quick story, I don't know if you can see this whole poster behind me, Lieutenant General Rashard Bonds. So we were at WonderCon, and we had an exhibit there. We had a table there. We had this poster on display, and this brother comes over and he's talking to us, and we're giving him the lowdown on who we are. And we were kind of fresh out the gate at this point, a couple years in. And while we're talking to him, out of the corner of my eye, I see his son, and I look over, and he's just staring at the poster, and not staring like, who is that, or like, what's going on here, but the look of he was idolizing the character, like like he saw himself in the character. Like, when I grow up, I could look like that, I can see myself in his character. And that's so important in storytelling. And I think a big difference between what we do, or what we set out to do, and what other, I'll just say storytellers, because I don't want to name names, what other storytellers out there are doing, is we're trying to do it from the most organic place possible. And we're not trying to force it. We don't want it to be inauthentic. So like Steph was saying, even if we're telling stories of characters that are of different races and ethnicities or different cultures than us, like for instance, when we were telling the Iga clan and the Musashi story, we're not Japanese, right? But we did reach out to someone who also went to Oberlin, who was Japanese. She translated the dialogue for us in Japanese. She corrected a lot of the things that we had going on in the story to make it more authentic, because we want to show that respect to the people in the culture and our storytelling, and have it be as authentic as possible. So I think that's a big part of our imagination without limitation, is saying, hey, well, we're going to go the extra mile to keep this authentic and respected, and respectful for the people that we're trying to represent.
Yeah, I think that's so important in storytelling, because I mean, I think that when stories connect with people, it is that authenticity that will come through and will separate good projects from great projects, right? Whenever when people can see themselves in the story, or something within it connects with them, to that point. So Steffon, I know you are, one of the things I learned, you're I don't know if you still are, or you were a CrossFit gym owner.
Yes.
So given the how the discipline and the dynamic nature of that level of training and all, how does that translate over? And Chris, I want to ask you the same, as far as from your corporate background. Steffon, how does that CrossFit discipline and energy and everything translate over to the creative side? And I would like to hear from Chris as well.
For sure. I mean, and don't let Chris fool you. He gets in it after at the gym too. He gets after it at the gym. But I mean, I think you already like you kind of already alluded to it. Like that, first of all, the discipline of it. One of the things that working out and something like CrossFit, and CrossFit isn't the only hard thing out there, right? But something about it is that it kind of teaches you how to perform under duress. And I think that has kind of a translation to creativity, especially when you're trying to create something that is going to stand the test of time, or that's going to speak to the times you're in. I think creators are often a little bit under duress, right? We're dealing with all these different things that are out there, all these different ideas that are coming at us, all the different social things and political things that we are trying to create under, right? All of the stresses of trying to get our stuff out there, right? Trying to find funding, trying to find, other creators to collaborate with, that kind of thing. Like, how do you say, like, okay, there's a lot of chaos going on. How do I focus in and get the job done? So I think that's one way that definitely helps. The other way is like the purely physical release of dopamine when you work out, man. You exercise, and that exercise that gives you that energy. I also write programming for some of our classes. So I didn't realize when someone was like, oh, you might have to write CrossFit program. I was like, oh, you mean come up with exercises? And it was like, no, write programming. And so, yes, it is coming up with exercises, but the amount of time I spend at the computer, like typing up like programming, I was like, oh snap, I am writing. And and then I got to be creative with the way, because you can't let everybody get bored, right? People come to CrossFit because they want something different every day, right? People who like, kind of like who train off of a more standard regimen, they usually don't like CrossFit. They're like, nope, I want this, and this. And we're like, all right, go do your thing, right? People who come to CrossFit, they want something different every day, right? So we have to be creative in that way too. So there's definitely some translation between, or some connection between like fitness and creativity for sure. I know I see it.
And I think from the corporate side, there was a lot of positives, but there were some negatives to coming from the corporate world over to the creative world that Steph told me about, and I didn't, fully experience or know until I actually experienced it. So one thing that's helped is, my background in sales, the boiler room stuff, all the cold contacting, constantly being told no, getting hung up on, right? All those things, all those years kind of gave me the thick skin in this space when we've heard no so many times, when you reach out to people and they just never get back to you, right? And when they finally do get back to you after the 7th, 8th email, it's, please stop emailing, contacting me, right? You just kind of, you got to let it roll off you and keep going. So that was one thing that definitely helped. Another thing, though, was those skills and those techniques that I learned from cold contacting. We have gotten so many meetings over the years with big production companies, studios, and creative executives because we invested in IMDb Pro, but then we also invested time and effort in crafting template emails, right? Crafting the message, getting an email cadence out, doing the research to figure out who's the right person to contact, getting in touch with those people. Sometimes having to get creative to figure out email domains, email name cadences, how all that works when it's not listed. So then we can still get in contact with those people. I learned all of that being on the bottom of the totem pole in the sales world, working my way up. So that really lent itself from the corporate side. As I rose up in the ladder, learning things like the art of negotiating, learning how companies structure their programs or structure their deals in the negotiation phases, right? Like an RFP, a request for, information, and RFI, things of those sorts, right? When we got into Project 365, we were on a budget. We didn't have, the big money to be spending on arts and all these things. And we had the writing covered. So I think we had a big chunk of it, taken care of was between us two, but the artwork, neither one of us can draw to save our lives. And so we had artists in the network, but knowing that process, right? And saying, okay, we got this project coming up. Why don't we put out an RFP for the project? So now we're reaching out to all the artists in our network and saying, hey, we have this coming up. Here's the details. What's the best price you can give us? We don't want you to cut yourself off at the knees, but at the same time, understand we're on a budget, and we would get the pricing back. We would get the timelines for completion back, and we know the work already, and we would compare it, and we could say, okay, we think this is the best option. Now we were able to kind of work out a deal that worked out for both sides, right? It was mutually beneficial. The artist got paid, and we paid them up front too. That was another thing. So they didn't have to wait for the money, but then we also didn't have to come out of pocket maybe as much as we would have if we were just dealing with one art vendor. So that was another thing, a positive thing. A con was me using these negotiation tactics with artists and creatives who have no stamina for that type of conversation, or no appetite for that type of conversation. So I'm coming into it, from a corporate aspect and saying, all right, this is what we got, this is what we need, blah, 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 blah. What's your price? Well, what's the budget? What's your price? What's your price? Well, I can work out, what's your price, right? And so it would get to a point where I would just tell me what your price is. And Steph would, in between conversations, you would be like, Chris, man, you got to understand, like, these are artists. Like, they're not used to doing business and negotiating and dealing with like that type of energy. Like, you got to put the baby gloves on and be a little bit more gentle. And I really had to tailor my approach and conversation methods with artists and that during the Project 365 days to the advice that Steph gave me. Because if I didn't, we could have ruined relationships, or we could have scared off artists, and now we don't have them and their talents anymore. So coming from the corporate side, that was a con. Because on that side, it's this is what it is. And you go back and forth, you volley, but you pretty much are playing in the same arena. I was coming in from, the Premier League into, a whole different space over here in the MLS. And I'm like looking around like, what the hell are you guys doing? And they're looking at me like, dude, you came over here to play with us. What are you doing? That was a difficult one to transition to.
Yeah, speaking of the business side and also the creative and thinking about, because in the media world, we're familiar with James Gunn, and I look at you guys as pretty much a James Gunn, because you're both creatives, but you're also having to run the business. And Chris, I wanted to follow up, as you were talking about the business aspects of things, and you're also a creator. How, for both of you, but Chris, I want you to start. How do you balance that creative output in your personal creative output that you're creating for this company that you run, but also having to deal with the business aspects of it as well? Because this may not be Warner Brothers, but you are running a company.
No, that's a great question. So, it's kind of always in the back of my mind, and it has been from day one. Steph can tell you, when I think we got into February. We were in month 2 of Project 365 when I went to Steph, and I was like, man, I know we had this idea to do this project and to have it be kind of an online thing that we do for the creative purpose, right? Like to flex our creative muscles and do something amazing. But I really feel like we need to turn this into a company. And so it was always kind of just the wheels were turning as I was also creating with Steph. And Steph jumped right on board. It wasn't, really any question for him either. And from there, we started laying the foundation and putting the framework together to kind of construct this as a business. We know at the heart of it, and the heart of our success is going to be the incredible storytelling and the characters that we create and what we put out to the world, right? That's going to drive everything. But keeping in the back of our mind the business aspect as well. So for instance, when we were doing Project 365, we set up every single chapter, every single character with their own origin story. We developed their own individual world, with the plan that when we did start having these conversations with studios and production companies and creative executives, they could essentially approach it a la carte. They didn't have to go with the whole thing. They didn't even have to go with the whole group. They could literally say, this is the Wolverine, right, of the X-Men. Yeah. We're going to pluck him out. We want to make a solo movie, or we want to do a series focused on him. And then we can slow roll that into the other stuff that you guys already have. Because we understood that coming in with 365 characters, stories, and this whole universe was going to be a huge chunk for 2 guys who are rookies in the game, right? Mm-hmm. So that was one thing. Another thing was when we got done with Project 365 and we were looking like, okay, well, what next? We were trying to get into cons that first year. Nobody gave us a look. When we got done and we did the rounds again the next year in 2017, now people were like, oh my God, you guys have been busy. Like, yeah, we definitely would love to have you at the show, right? So then it's working with them, negotiating how can we get a bigger exhibit space without paying double the price, right? Mm. So the negotiation tactics there, kind of, and massaging those relationships and establishing them, instead of just approaching it from a creative standpoint and saying, we're going to get a booth and we're going to set up our stuff. It was, how can we establish a long-lasting relationship with these vendors or with these companies so we can continue to do the shows, maybe get a little bit of discount, maybe get a little bit of hookup, but also, represent for Creative Extreme in a positive way as well. So that was another aspect. And then of course there's the monetary aspect, right? What we're going to set the price point at, kind of knowing what comic book costs, what graphic novels cost, what merchandise costs, and then what our own individual costs are, what we need to set the price at in order to make the money back or to make some profit off of that without taxing people, right? Without coming in crazy hot and saying, you got to pay us $70 for a t-shirt or something like that. So, there was a business aspect in there. And then when we got even further down the road and it was having these conversations with creative executives and production companies and studios, massaging those relationships, establishing those connections, building out our networks, but also learning how to present Creative Extreme in a way where it was digestible to them and it didn't scare them off. And that took time for us
Yeah.
from a business standpoint, to really understand what's going through their heads on the other side of the table and what is it that they're looking for. So then we knew how to present it and what to come to the table with. But once we started getting the insight, and once we started to get some really good, solid people on our side who were able to school us the game, that's when our business acumen kind of took over and really just jettisoned us off into a sprint almost over the last number of years with trying to make progress here.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Steffon?
I would say real quick, just like similarly how Chris was saying he had to get used to kind of like dealing with the artists. It was, for me, it was the other way around, having to get, used to kind of dealing in, in these deal making rooms, where I wanted to be like, give everybody the benefit of the doubt and be like, oh no, like, everybody's negotiating in good faith. Chris was like, no, they're not, man. You gotta get somewhere. At some point, you got to lay it down. You got to make sure that, I was a little naive, to that part of it. But same thing. I've gotten a lot better at it. And actually now, Chris and we're really good as middlemen, we're really good at, we have artists like I've had artists come to me and say like, hey, I have this project. Can you go negotiate it for me? Because I don't like talking to clients. So but you're pretty good at it. So yeah.
Cool. Because we've had situations too, like real quick, if I could tell a story.
Sure. We
were talking with a producer and he loved our stuff. He particularly liked Alpha Initiative Zero, felt he had a couple of leads to production companies to get it made. And, from a high level in our conversation, he was like, all I'm really asking is just to be able to be included on the project as a producer, obviously get, my cut of whatever it is that the pays, and we talked it all out. And, verbally in the conversation, it all sounded good. When we got the actual paperwork, though, I went through and I started reading it and, putting my paralegal skills to use. And there was some things in there that were quite, alarming. So Steph and I went over them. We pad them. We then took that and highlighted everything and passed it off to our entertainment lawyer that we work with. And he took a look at it. We hopped on a call and he was like, no, you guys are good for catching this stuff because, this needs to be that and that needs to be that. And the big one was he had said that if he was able to secure a deal for a reasonable offer, that we had to take it, we couldn't refuse. And that was it. Very broad general language. And that was the big one. We were like, whoa, wait a minute. And, we understood where he was coming from when he was saying, I'm going to be going out to my contacts and my network. I'm going to be, putting a little bit of pressure on my relationships. So I'm trying to get this deal done. But at the same time, I got to know that I'm going to get compensated for my efforts, right? And for the usage of my people in my network. So we understood that. At the same time, though, we're saying, what's a reasonable offer? Like, well, industry standard, well, what's the industry standard? Because that's always changing. And if you're going to sit here and say, well, it's industry standard for them to pay us, $50,000, let's just say is a random number, but they own our IP outright, we're not okay with that.
Right.
But if we sign this, that means we have to do it. So now we're signing away IP. We're getting paid peanuts for it. And then we're going to have to sit back and watch these things make billions potentially in the box office. No. So that business, acumen, that practice, and being able to know that and do that really did help us out in that scenario as well.
Yeah, that's a real fascinating insight to just sort of what smaller creatives and creatives in general just have to really look out for. And it's great y'all have a team of that, and I think that's one of the strongest things it seems about your company is like you both approach, you have the best of both worlds. You have the creative side, but you also are, you have the business side as well. And to that point about as we one last question, just as far as the sort of big picture, and then I want to transition to talk a little bit about Alpha Initiative Zero since you just brought it up. You operate across various mediums. Now we film, digital, and print. Which medium do you currently feel offers you all the best opportunity to build, to have immersive universe building?
Oh man,
yeah,
that's a That's a great question. I think I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna give kind of two answers. So on the practical side, especially if you're a small creator, I'll give kind of like the small creator versus like someone that's a little bit more on the practical side with the small creator, independent creator who's just starting out. I would say the best way is print and not feeling so pressured to like do like a comic book, because comic books are very expensive to produce, right? However, the idea of finding a freelance artist or someone who can draw you just a couple of pictures of your character, right? And then writing out the story or developing a story. I think that's like the most practical and easy way for someone who wants to begin building a world, using the words, kind of just laying things out. Like print is the way to go when it comes to just kind of that's what we did, right? We came and said, like, we got the words, we just need a few pictures. Boom, we have an instant universe, right? That kind of thing. So for a small independent, I would say that's like the biggest opportunity, not to mention the fact that social media is free, right? Even if you don't have a website, it's free to have it. If you have a phone and you have some internet, it's free to have an Instagram account, right? It's free to have a Facebook, whatever it is, TikTok, whatever it is, there's all these ways to kind of build your world. And now if you are the creator, now it's time to be creative. How are you going to stick out? How are you going to stick out in the deluge of stuff, right? The doom scrolling, right? Why are they going to stop on your post? Right. So you just kind of like thinking of those things that's where the creativity comes along, not just with creating a story. On a larger scale, in my opinion, it's film, man. Like it's film all day. Right. I feel like, like I love the immersion of film and just kind of being able to give someone a full world in just like a couple of hours, and then you can play in that playground different ways and, make the offshoots and the spinoffs and all that stuff. But that comes later, right? But you can create, before all of these franchises were multiple movies, right? Whether it was the first Star Wars movie, everyone forgets that it started with one. There was only one Star Wars movie for like 5 years. It was just one movie. In 77, it was just, but that one movie gave you such a full world. We forget that full world was already there before we had 8 other movies and 17 million other TV shows, right? Same thing with Harry Potter, right? The first Harry Potter movie, the first Star Trek movie, the first Marvel, the first MCU universe movie, like the first Iron Man movie. There was a whole little world right in there, So I think that film offers an incredible opportunity, and we're working on a few things now. Just like you said, I mean, we'll talk about Alpha Initiative Zero in a minute, but 13 minutes, and you got such an insight into a much larger world just from those 4 or 5 characters.
Yeah. I'll say, I think I agree with Steph. I think film is kind of the ultimate storytelling medium, especially if you're looking to build worlds. I think that the thing with it is, and we know this especially to be true today, is you're not guaranteed to get another shot after that first one, And Steph actually was the one who schooled me to this. He's like, you can't write for the sequel. You can't write for the trilogy. You got to write for this joint right now. Make this one as incredible and phenomenal as possible, and make them demand for a sequel, right? Make them demand the trilogy. But that's not guaranteed. So I think the next best thing, if we're talking about the upper end, right? Because I also agree. I think print for the beginners, or for creatives who don't have access to resources and budgets and all that kind of stuff, print is the best. But there's something about a series, writing a season or seasons of a world, because you get to take your time and you can let things breathe so much more. You can introduce so many more characters, and then you can actually take time to flesh those characters out more, because you have 6, 8, 10, 12 episodes, and you were from 30 to 60 minutes, and then you compare it to a 2-hour medium. If you can land that 2 hours though, if you can get that film where it needs to be, oh man, you're to the moon. If you do a season, there's a great chance that you might have 2 phenomenal hours out of an 8-episode season. Right. And it's like, that's not like, this isn't baseball. You can't fail 70% of the time and still be in the Hall of Fame. So like there's the risk there with doing a series. It's you gotta hit like way more and be a lot more consistent with it. But the pro is you get so much more room to kind of play established lore, build it out and stuff like that. So it's pros and cons, I think.
Yeah, well, speaking of films, let's talk about Alpha Initiative Zero. Here's the poster for it. I did get a chance to watch both the trailer and the short film, and I really have to say I really enjoyed it. I really did. Didn't know anything about it. Clearly hadn't seen the source material. But you're right. It when I watched it, I was like, at the end of it, I was like, I want more. It really, I was like, for a short film, I've seen, one, just kudos and congratulations for getting it produced. And I do want to hear how it came into being, but to that also to that point, I really, just like, as we were talking about earlier in the interview, the authenticity of story and just the well constructed story that, as a viewer, as you're just talking about Star Wars, it's just one, but you have so much like story packed in there that I was like, I want to learn more about what's going on in this universe. So what was the original inspiration for Alpha Initiative Zero as far as the graphic novel, and then how did it get translated to a short film?
Yeah, so Lieutenant General Rashard Bonds started out as a passive, almost filler character in Project 365. We would have these 8-hour planning sessions where we're on the phone just talking. We're just talking trash the whole time, but we're working, right? We're planning it. We have an open spreadsheet. We'll put a character name in for 1 to 31 or 30, whatever, and name, power, details about their origin story, then how they move the greater saga along, power set, all that kind of stuff. And we were like, we need a guy for this day. Who are we going to put in this day? Oh, well, I got an idea, and we put it in there. And he just kind of organically became or grew into a main character.
He was like a sidekick at first.
Yeah, he was like a sidekick. And that was another thing too. The organic growth of the character kind of took us away from, what we were trying to avoid, which was creating characters of different cultures and ethnicities and races and different backgrounds as sidekicks. Right. We wanted the representation for the front man or the front woman to be of those different backgrounds, those different types of characters. But we did create him initially as a sidekick. But again, he grew into being the man. And he is one of the top heroes out of all hundreds of characters within Project 365. So he ends up forming the Alpha Initiative in Project 365. That was like our Avengers group. There's another iteration in there called the Alpha Resistance, which he's also a part of. But when we got done with it, we were like, well, what can we do now? One idea we had was to do an origin story for it, for Alpha Initiative. So we called it Alpha Initiative Zero. We're going to take it back to the roots. And an inspiration for creating the different characters in Alpha Initiative Zero was, I have so many people, and Steph knows people too, that are military veterans. And we've seen military veterans land on both sides of the coming home. Some have come home, reintegrated into society very well, families, great jobs, they're thriving, they're doing great. Other ones though come back and have a more difficult time reintegrating into society, and the resources and the things that they need in order to help get them back on track and reintegrate aren't always there. They're not always available. And unfortunately, then a stigma gets attached to that person. Right, because they are hampered and their life is more difficult than it was when they left to go serve. They're seen a certain way, they're treated a certain way, and that treatment is well below the level of where they should be treated. And so we wanted to tell that story, but not in a way that kind of glorified the trauma, right? We didn't want to do the typical, they're, just riddled with PTSD and they're off their rocker and, you can't trust them anywhere in public around people. And we also didn't want them to be portrayed as solely as the tip of the spear, right? For the United States government or whatever organization to just point and throw and treat them like, they're disposable bodies, or they're either that or they're just raging killing machines, right? We wanted to find that human side to it, because ultimately at the end of the day, these are men and women who are going to do something that most of us can't or don't want to do, right? And they're real life heroes. Like, they are the real life heroes that we have in this world. So we wanted to put all of that positivity and the good stuff on the forefront in a way, though, that we're telling an authentic story that's interesting, has great storytelling, and is just, as Steph mentioned before, high octane action. So that was the inspiration for the characters, for the story, and what we wanted to do with it. And we actually started with a screenplay. We did a feature-length screenplay for that was based on the graphic novel, or I'm sorry, we did a feature-length screenplay that was used as the basis for the graphic novel. So we worked with artists of that were in our network, and we gave them the screenplay. And we're like, hey man, look, take these pages and turn it into a graphic novel for us. And we worked with them on that. Graphic novel came out. It was received exceptionally well by fans at all the different cons we went to, and things like that. And so then from there, we ended up meeting James Gavsey, the phenomenal, incomparable James Cavsey, the producer, at WonderCon one year. Kept in touch with him. He was one of those solid people that I mentioned before that we met over the years, and gave us great advice, gave us great guidance. And he's
James is a good dude.
Yeah, James is awesome. And so he came upon the opportunity to do a short film. And he reached out to us and say, hey, like, would you guys be okay if we based our short film off of the Alpha Initiative Zero graphic novel? And we were like, yeah, like, of course, like there's no question. Hell yeah. So we started working with him, and he brought in, a writer that he knew to work with us to help craft the story, but also to show respect to the source material and to us, to make sure we were okay with the direction of the story that was being told. Is this what the characters would say? Is this how, things would go down, so on and so forth. And when they wanted to, I felt like they needed to take a creative turn somewhere, they always checked in with us to make sure we were okay with it, and we would sign off on it. So they were phenomenal partners. And then James knows Michael Lear, who is an incredible stunt choreographer, fight choreographer. He's been in the game for a minute, lauded amongst all of his peers. And he's done everything from John Wick franchise stuff, Fast and Furious, Daybreak on Netflix, Extraction on Netflix, the new Mortal Kombat movie that's coming out. He was behind doing the fight stunt choreography for that stuff. So, I mean, he's done some huge, high profile, mega budget stuff. James got him to come on and direct and do the fight choreography for this joint. So that, and that's Michael and his crew. And it's just like, we were so blessed to be able to, again, know James, have him know Michael, and then them being able to put up the bat signal and have all these incredibly talented stunt, actors and actors come be a part of the project. So that was kind of the roll into it. But Steph was actually there on site when they were filming. So Steph, what was it like? Tell them what it was like when you were there, the process of filming and all that.
Yeah, it was a 3-day shoot. And literally, I think it was between 12 and 14 hours. First one was 12 hours, and then it went from there, and it was all shot at night too. Like, we started at like 3:00 in the afternoon. But to Chris's point, the team of people that we got connected with through James and Michael, stunt performers who have done all kinds of stuff. One of the great things they said to me was how much fun it was to kind of embody original characters that didn't have like long legacies already, right? Like, of course, I'm sure it's an honor when someone says you're going to be the next Batman or you're going to be the next Spider-Man, right? It's definitely an honor, right? However, you are adding a little bit of yourself to something that's already established, which is probably an incredible experience, right? However, when you get to embody a character that is brand new, right? Now you become part of the creative process of what that character is going to look like moving forward, and the actors who were able to play Lieutenant Rashard Bonds and Lieutenant Emily Wright, just those two characters right there, those actors, they brought so much, to those characters. And the first time they're played on screen, no matter what, moving forward, they have laid a foundation. So it was really incredible being part of that process there and seeing them and embody the character. And then of course, when Chris was talking about like the idea of taking creative turns. I know one of the creative turns that was just a little bit different was kind of the way that the villain in the movie, was kind of written. His powers were tweaked a little bit from like what they originally were, and then like his presentation. I remember initially his presentation was a little bit more refined, like in our books, in our creation, but for the purposes of the story, he was a little bit more kind of like cavalier, a little bit more, devil may cry kind of thing, right? Which, and then, so at first we were like, is that really like, working? But then as, we began to tell the story, because again, one of the things that we were really big on was that the fight scenes weren't just fight scenes, that every fight scene had to tell a story, and in a lot of movies, in a lot of TV shows, yes, some fight scenes that are really pivotal will tell a story, and then other ones are just kind of like, we got to get this action in, right?
I am so happy to hear you say that, because that is a critique of mine of a big franchise. I'll just put out there Star Wars. The lightsaber battles. And one of the things that I always like point to is, you can have a physically dynamic lightsaber battle, but if it's just spectacle for spectacle's sake, and it's not like, The Empire Strikes Back. The reason why to me that film just works so well is there are more spectacular lightsaber battles in Star Wars, but the emotional intensity of Luke and Vader in the carbonite room. That's why it's so memorable.
Absolutely.
But to that point, and given Chris, I know you touched on it a little bit, and you did as well, Steffon, as far as adapting the source material, which or adapting things for screenplay, and I always just wonder, how does that work for you as the creative, and what you all have had in mind, and as far as on the page, translate into the screen, and your interactions with it. I mean, think about like George R.R. Martin with Game of Thrones, and
right,
and the changes that they make from I was just thinking, I really enjoyed A Night of the Seven Kingdoms that was just on earlier this year, and I read I did read the book, and seeing how they adapted things from the book into the TV show, and in some cases it made the book it worked better for the screen. So from your perspective as creatives, seeing your work being adapted from page to screen, how did you feel about that when they wanted to go in a different direction than you may have envisioned? And two, how, I know you touched on a little bit earlier, but really want to expand on, who has creative control at the end of the day? I guess it's my long way, about my roundabout way of getting there.
It's interesting, because one of the things that we often do talk about too is that different stories call for different mediums sometimes, and I've had to explain this to people, is that a book and a movie, while they might be based on the same story, they're two different things, and so I think that when we, even to Chris's point about a novel, right? When you write a novel, or we wrote 700,000 words for Project 365, right? You can't get all those words on a screen. So you have to pick and choose, right? You have to pick and choose. And then once you get it up there, you also have to make it compelling, because something that reads on the page, like you could be reading a novel, and you can be enthralled, from page to page to page to page, right? But when it's on the screen, you have to enthrall people in like 30 seconds. Like you have you have to hit them, right? So you're going to have to eliminate stuff, or you're going to have to change it so that it's more compelling on the screen. Not to mention the fact that you can't hear everybody's inner thoughts in like on a screen like you can in a book, right? You can read everybody's inner thoughts. That makes it more dynamic, more compelling, more layered. How do you get those layers on the screen? Right. Like, so it's a different medium. So we had always talked about how, man, we're crafting something and we have the stories, we have the basis, but we knew that when we come to the table and someone is like, going to say, hey, we want to make this into a TV show. It's like, all right, you need to prove to us that we can trust you creatively. Once you do that, man, like make our story better, make it more amazing, make it compelling for the screen. It's like we were very like, we're open to that, to Chris's point as well, saying like, if we see something happening and we're going to speak up, we're going to be like, we don't know if that's quite, dude. It's like, make your case to us. Make your case for why you think that should be. And maybe we'll come around, or maybe we'll be like, well, what if you tweaked it this way to make it better? So that's kind of like, a little bit of how we approached it.
Yeah. Is there is there a change that without giving too much away from about the story but is there one scene, or is there an Easter egg or something that you all can give an example of, like, oh yeah, that actually works better on the screen than how it played in the book, as far as the film?
Well, I got a couple of examples. So one, we have to give a shout out to Vonzell Carter, who played Lieutenant General Rashard Bonds, and Chelsea Goldsmith, who plays Lieutenant Emily Wright. They did an incredible job. But this is Lieutenant General Rashard Bonds, right? Like in the comic, he's very comic book build, 6'6", 250, 270 pounds, just jacked, with all the athleticism in the world, not bogged down by the massive muscular frame, right? And you watch the short film, it's not how Vonzell looks. No. But Vonzell did an incredible job at playing Lieutenant General Rashard Bonds. The Lieutenant Emily Wright character is funny because she's based off of a friend of mine that I've known, for 26 years now, and military veteran. She's still active within the military. She's a sergeant now, but get back here stateside. But she is a fair-skinned white woman with dark black hair, striking blue eyes. We send that description off to the artist for the graphic novel. She comes back, the character art comes back looking like Rihanna. And we're like, okay, all right. So we just rolled with it. And then when they casted Lieutenant Emily Wright, they casted more towards, the Rihanna kind of thing. And you get Chelsea Goldsmith in there, who doesn't look like Rihanna, but she has the, the tan skin, the sun-kissed skin and the hair and all that. So, the characters weren't exactly that they were casted didn't look exactly how they did in the book, right? In the source material, but they both did beyond incredible at portraying the character and doing the work on camera. That it's just like, okay, like if you sit back and you cast these roles, you try to, as creators, we try to tend to put somebody in there that looks as close to the character that we envision as possible, not realizing that that's incredibly limiting the scope of the talent that you could get. Because in this case, James and Michael put them in and they knocked it out the park. Like, it was just phenomenal. So that was one area where we were like, that's who they casted. They don't look anything like the characters, but man, are we so blessed to have them be the ones who did it. And another part was with like Steffon mentioned, with Edgar Lockhart, the villain, right? Mm-hmm. He is supposed to be a very elegant, he's an elegant villain, right? Yeah. And to have him, be more cavalier and kind of be more unassuming on screen, it was, well, that's not how he looks in the source material, right? And they reached out to us and they asked us, like I mentioned before, hey, is there any way that you guys would be okay with us if we just tweaked his power set a little bit? Because from the source material between the graphic novel and Project 365, Edgar Lockhart, the character, does go through a progression.
Yeah, don't give too much away.
I'm not going to give too much away. I'm not going to give too much away. And part of his story arc, though, is that he does go through this progression, right?
Yeah.
So, it was they came to us and it made sense because it does fit, right, in the source material in a way. But in both of those scenarios, I think the key was for Steph and I to be open and flexible, and to be willing to trust the process, so to speak. But at the same time, they showed us some respect by coming to us too and saying, what do you guys think about this? As opposed to just taking it and running with it and doing whatever they wanted. And then Steph and I are at the premiere like, what the hell? Like, what the hell is that? Like, that's not how we would have done it at all. So it worked both ways, but the flexibility, being open and willing to change for the betterment of the film, it has to be there in order for a good partnership to exist to make a great film.
Yeah, well, like I said, it definitely was a really enjoyable watch, and I know you mentioned several times this evening about the veteran PTSD and a veteran military presence, and I know at least the distribution, at least where I was able to watch it, was a veterans a platform to give veterans creative opportunities and all. How did this? My last question for you, my next to last question is, how did the distribution for the film happen as far as picking this particular platform? Did y'all leave that up to James and the producer, or did y'all have some thoughts as far as where and how it should be distributed?
Same kind of concept with like the creative part of it, where James was kind of spearheaded that effort, and everything, and he would come to us and say, this is what I'm thinking about doing, this is the opportunities we have, how we want to go about it. We definitely asked about, well, what if we just put it on YouTube, and what if so like we definitely made our suggestions, but then he was like, well, we have some different opportunities, and we have some different avenues that we can take. So yeah, it was kind of the same process. James was like, he had an in, I believe, he's on like the board of VetStream TV, and he got on the board, and it was this upstart streaming service, and there's so many streaming services out there right now, which is I think there's this good. I mean, I think that's a pretty good thing, because it gives more creators an opportunity to get their stuff on platforms. And independent creators, I don't want to go. No, we're kind of getting to time, so I don't want to go too down the rabbit hole of one big conglomeration controlling all of our creative input.
Don't worry about time. Don't worry about time.
But I think it's important.
Go ahead.
Just real quick, Steph. I think it's important to note that when we got finished with Alpha Initiative Zero, I don't think James was on the board yet. He had come into contact with the people who had started and founded the platform, were getting it up and running. He went to them because he thought it would be a great, and by platform we mean VetStream TV. VetStreamTV.com is where you can watch it. But he went to them because he thought it would be a great fit, especially knowing the mission of what type of story we were trying to tell, to honor veterans and to put them in a good light, in a hero's light. And he carried that over to them. They, were like, oh yeah, we'll take a look at it. And then they watched it. And from there, things just kind of continued to build. And James being such a great partner and being so knowledgeable, I think eventually they came to him and like, hey, could you help us out with our stuff too? Because we could really use your expertise and to help us build this. And that's how he got in with them. But yeah, sorry, Steph, keep going.
No, you're good. No, I mean, I was kind of going down that, about to go down that route anyway.
Yeah, I'll definitely make sure to put it into the show notes, about VetStream TV, where people can go watch the short film, because it is really really enjoyed it, and definitely hopefully we'll get that sequel coming very, very soon. Speaking into existence. So my last question for you, and again, thank you so much for your time. Really enjoyed this conversation with you both tonight. So where do y'all see the Creative Extreme going in the next 5 years?
All the way up. to quote the incomparable Fat Joe, all the way up. That's what we feel.
Yeah, it's like we've gotten, like, we're continuing to have conversations with major companies, and some of those big conglomerates. We're definitely not above that. But we're having conversations with some of those big conglomerates. But at the same time, we also are just seeing the value and the opportunity in independently producing stuff as well. And so we have a couple of different projects that we are working on, because we don't want to be limited by the quote unquote gatekeepers, right? And right now there's so much opportunity for independent filmmakers, independent showmakers. There's so many opportunities, and you got to beat the pavement, and it's hard. And you got to find funding in different ways, or you got to mortgage your house, or whatever you got to do. But at the end of the day, if you want to create, and I would also say this as a parting to other creators out there who are like, man, how did they do it, or how are they doing it? If you want to create, at the end of the day, it's going to have to be some sacrifice, right? You're going to have to put your priorities and say, like, listen, I want to do this, and I'm going to make it happen. One of the great things we have nowadays is cell phones that have cameras that are just as powerful as the cameras that they were making movies on just like 15 years ago. So you can, so you can, take your creative idea. Like, we've seen the success of, people on TikTok and YouTube and all that doing creative stuff with limited resources. So I see us continuing to ride this amazing creative train that we're on into this amazing creative community that is continuing to form around, independent film, mainstream film, independent, creativity, books and TV and stuff like that. I see us continuing to build on that, our independent stuff making inroads for us in the mainstream, and our mainstream stuff providing resource for us to continue to create independently. Like, we want to keep it going.
Awesome. Chris?
Yeah. No, I mean, from Steph's mouth to God's ears, man. That's how we see it going. That's the vision, and we're gonna grind until we make it happen.
Awesome. Well, before we wrap, want to give you guys opportunity to tell folks where they can find you, as far as the Creative Extreme, and also if you do have social media presence, please share that information, and where folks can find all your wonderful projects.
Yeah, so the website is www.thecreativeextreme.com. As Steph says, make sure you include all the E's in there. They're all in there. The entirety of Project 365 is up on the website, so people can read it. It's free, so it doesn't cost anything. We also have TCE versus the Universe, which is our delve into kind of fan fiction. We pit our characters versus popular characters like Captain America, Wolverine, Batman, the Joker, Wonder Woman. So those are, really fun stories for people to dive into. We have some TCE shorts on there. So some short stories that kind of give a little bit more background or insight into individual character worlds. The trailer for Alpha Initiative Zero is on the website, so they can check that out as well. So that's the website. Social media, we're on everything: Instagram, X, Facebook, Threads, TikTok. If you just search The Creative Extreme, we'll pop up. You can't miss us. So please go to our social media, like, subscribe, follow, share, comment, engage, do the whole thing. I'm trying to blow our numbers up here because that's important in Hollywood, unfortunately, is getting your massive following to get on their radar. So yes, if you want to see more of us, please go like, subscribe, follow, the whole thing. We're also on YouTube. We have our podcast, The Abbott and the Artista. So we have our episodes up there. We've been doing them more sporadically as of late, but we're working on getting more episodes in the can. So you can watch The Abbott and the Artista on our YouTube channel. Again, it's just, at The Creative Extreme. Search us, you'll find us. And we have some other interesting and fun videos on there as well for people to check out. We have, I think, our music video for the Alpha Initiative Zero theme song is on there with our artwork and everything and stuff. So that's dope. So check that out. But yeah, you can find us on all the platforms at The Creative Extreme and our website.
Great. Well, Thank you both so much for your time this evening. Really enjoyed spending time with you, talking about the Creative Extreme, learning more about Alpha Initiative Zero. I'll be sure to for folks. Chris, thanks for sharing all your info. I'll definitely have it in the show notes so people can link to it, so they can see the trailer and also see all the things Project 365 and all the things you guys are working on. And with that, thank you so much for watching another episode of the Cine Nerd Podcast. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also by going to our website, www.cinenerdpodcast.com. And with that, good night, geek out. You're welcome.
Take it easy, y'all.